Assalamu alaikum and hello everybody. Yvonne here from My Hello Kitchen with a new interview that I am super excited about today. Here we have with us Eugenia Bone of the fantastic Fungi Cookbook, community cookbook that I have been touting the past few days. Welcome, Eugenia. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. I'm glad to be here today.
And you're coming to us from New York,
I
correct?
am. New York City.
New
Yeah.
York City. Fabulous. You're 3 hours ahead of me. So you're in the afternoon over there. And we had a wonderful conversation a few days ago about this beautiful, beautiful cookbook. Let me show everybody again, called Fantastic Fungi. And I got this book a few weeks ago and couldn't stop browsing through the beautiful recipes in here, wonderful pictures. I love mushrooms. I love to eat mushrooms. I have never foraged for mushrooms, but we're going to talk about all of that today.
Yeah.
So I'm excited because this is a topic that, we don't really hear much about. We don't hear about all the varieties that are out there and how people can cook with them and all the benefits of consuming them. So I'm excited to dive into that today. And you have so much wisdom and expertise in this area. So let me introduce my audience to you and your background so everybody can get to know who you are. And I encourage all of you to leave your comments and ask questions here today so that once we're talking, we can take those questions and get your answers because we have a wonderful expert to impart her wisdom with us. Eugenia Bone is a nationally known nature and food writer. She's the former president of the New York Mycological Association and a member of the National Association of Science Writers. She has published over 6 books, including the James Beard nominated Well-Preserved and Mycophilia Revelations from the Weird World of Mushrooms. Her work has appeared in many outlets, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Savour, and Food and Wine. She's currently featured in Michelle Obama's Netflix series, Waffles and Mochi, in the Mushrooms episode, of course. So those of you who have kids might have seen that. That's super exciting. I'm going to put a link to the documentary called Fantastic Fungi here. Well, it's not the link to the documentary, but to the trailer that you guys just have to see it. After just 2 minutes of that, you just feel like you want to know more about this incredible world of fungi. So thank you again for joining us, Eugenia. Tell us more. How did this beautiful cookbook idea come to be? And the contributors in the book are also fascinating with their own world of expertise. So can you tell us how this whole idea started?
Absolutely. So I participated in the Fantastic Fungi documentary. I was one of the talking heads and a kind of generalist about mycology. And I was talking with Louis about mushrooms from the culinary standpoint. And we had become friends in the course of doing the movie. And last summer, he contacted me and he said, Eugenia, I really want to do a Fantastic Fungi cookbook and I want you to write it. And I thought about that and I was like, there's a lot of great forager chef cookbooks out there. And I didn't really see what would be so distinguishing about one by me, except that it would be my palate, So I was like, I don't think so. And then it hit me. I know all these people in the world of mycology, all these fellow foragers. And I knew also that that Louis had built a large community around the movie because the way he distributed that film originally was by hand. It was like self-publishing a book. He went to every little theater all over the country. He brought his film and he introduced it and he put together panels. I mean, it was really a lot of legwork, but he built a community. So we thought, let's do a community cookbook tapping this large group of people who are excited about mushrooms, who cook mushrooms and foray for mushrooms, and see if we can develop a book out of it. So there were a few steps to the process. The first thing we did was create a platform on the Fantastic Fungi website, which is still there. And people upload their mushroom recipes and they share them. And that was the idea, is just kind of a good community, good vibes thing.
Sure.
But it turned out that there were enough excellent recipes to put together a cookbook. And so that's what made it happen. And so I love community cookbooks because they tend to be authentic and
Yes.
the recipes are very well tested. But this community is quite large across the country, made up of mushroom enthusiasts of all types. So it's very eclectic, lots of different ethnicities, lots of different dietary inclinations. And it makes for this really colorful demographic, this really colorful picture of who we are as mushroom lovers.
I would say it's not your ordinary community cookbook because there's so much information that goes a lot deeper about mushrooms in here. Like I love that you have these sections in the middle of the recipes that kind of stop and pause and give people a really interesting insight into the foraging, into the medicinal nutrition, because you've got so many fascinating people that have contributed to the cookbook and really know this world of fungi that I think the average person just wouldn't have any idea about. But my favorite topic in the books, if you guys can see here, this is just an idea of this the deep the deep information in the sections. My favorite one is "Let food be thy medicine." Why mushroom should be a part of a regular diet.
Yeah,
I mean that's right up my alley of things I love to know.
Yes,
and so that's the unique part about this book, and that's kind of what interested me the most, was because I don't feel like I know enough about. I mean, we see a couple of varieties of mushrooms and fungi at the grocery store, but not enough. So could you maybe touch on this particular area a little bit of, who contributes to this research that's here in the book?
Okay, so I wrote all the essays, and they're drawn from my 20 plus years of following the mycology stories. So I read papers, I follow the current science, and then I reach out and for these essays, and anytime I write about mushrooms, reach out to the experts in the different areas. So they're everything from the perspectives of folks that foraging chefs, who base their careers on developing recipes from wild foods, to scientists who are trying to figure out what's the trigger that will make a particular type of fungus produce a mushroom. What's the environmental trigger necessary for cultivation?
Right.
So those essays really, they were kind of commissioned by the publisher. The publisher was like, I really want to add this level to the cookbook to bring people more into mycology in general and understand that this is not just a sort of single faceted subject. There's more to mushrooms than pizza topping.
Exactly. And it's so fascinating in the way that you've broken it down for the average person to understand is really us'eful. I mean,
well, that's my job. So.
Yes. And I haven't finished it all, and there's so much more I want to read. And I'll also want to watch the documentary, The Fantastic Fungi, too, because that's
lovely.
Just the trailer is beautiful. And I can't help but thinking, when foraging is something that people kind of know more about today than before. I mean, I think chefs are doing more of it. It's not necessarily something you just read about anymore. There are groups around the country that forage for different things. I'm in Southern California, and you can find foraging groups for all kinds of stuff. But for anyone who's interested in mushrooms, I guess there's mycological associations around the country. I know there was one in Illinois when I was in Chicago, and I was always watching what they were doing, but I never actually went. And so that's something that always interested me. But I think also people kind of have maybe a mixed notion of truffles being the only mushrooms that are typically foraged, and that they're also very expensive. But that's not the case. I was nicely surprised when I was in Turkey that there's morels in Turkey. Like there's places I never thought that there would be a mushroom like a morel, and they have a little festival where people can go, try different types of mushrooms, but they also, I think, go out into the forest and forage. But when I was there, I tasted some mushrooms that were kind of like a meat replacement.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't even look like mushrooms. I mean, the people would go to the forest floor, pick them up, they're covered in dirt, and they scrub it all off. And then, they break off because they're really fragile. And, I would ask, how do you cook these? And then, they would just tell me, like, a little bit of olive oil, a little bit
Yeah.
or butter, put them in your eggs. It's not so complicated. And then I brought them home, tasted them, and I couldn't believe that they were like meat. I mean, mushrooms here in the grocery stores, yeah, they have that meatiness, especially the shiitakes and stuff. But these were something else I had never expected to really taste like meat in a way. And you and I talked about that in our conversation on the phone. There's kind of a scientific reason for that, right?
Yes. Mushrooms actually have pretty high grade protein. They don't have a lot of protein in them because they're mostly water, but they have good quality protein. And that's and that good quality protein is responsible. Some of those amino acids are responsible for that umami flavor, that meaty savoriness that mushrooms have, and that you can bump up with other ingredients. So this protein, I won't say protein rich, but high protein value mushrooms can be easily substituted in a range of recipes for meat. So if you have a recipe for, I don't know, sloppy joes, you could use chopped mushrooms instead. And there's some research that's come out of the UK suggesting that people who replace meat with mushrooms in their recipes not only lose weight because there's just less calories in mushrooms, but just as importantly, they feel full because of that high grade protein, and they don't snack so swiftly between meals as if they had vegetables straight up, had a vegetable lunch. And so it's that quality that lends, it's those amino acids that lends mushrooms not only their flavor, their meaty savoriness, but also some of the satiating feelings that we get from eating mushrooms. So
could it be because they're also so nutrient dense that's probably why we're becoming more full when we eat some?
Well, it's the proteins. Yeah, it's the aminos. Yeah. It's the amino acids that are so that give you that sensation, but you're not taking as many calories in.
Right.
So it's a kind of great low fat food. It's a healthy food, and it's low fat, and there's other qualities that mushrooms have that are beneficial to your health. And I mean, to not incorporate mushrooms into your diet along with other foods is just like, why? They're so varied, and they're good food for you, and they're low impact environmentally. So,
and talking about that variety that you just mentioned, I think that we have to also kind of figure out where to shop for mushrooms, because that's the thing people get stumped on. They might go to the store and find 1-2 varieties if you're lucky.
Yes.
But do you have any tips on where people can go to find that variety? Because there's so many different varieties in this book, and I think people would. Just looking at the pictures, you want to try so many of the recipes, but people might feel stumped on where to go. So,
well, in the introduction, I give some tips about where I got the mushrooms to test all these recipes. So that's so there's a number of ways. That's sweet.
Beautiful
Everything
pictures.
We're going to eat later.
Yes.
So the grocery store is going to have, whatever there's a market for in that region. And so if more people get into eating mushrooms, then more cultivated mushrooms will show up at the grocery store. And there's a wide variety of cultivated mushrooms with a lot of different flavors. If you try Asian markets, like if you've got any Japanese or Korean markets, They love mushrooms. Those cuisines there's a lot of good, wonderful mushroom recipes in those cuisines. You're likely to find more variety.
Yeah.
You can also buy dried wild mushrooms, as well as some as dried cultivated. But dried wild mushrooms is a wonderful way to utilize these mushrooms that you otherwise have to forage or buy in season from a forager. Dried mushrooms is a great alternative.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of internet sources for that. You buy them, they show up, they're beautiful. And I can recommend, like, I love Far West Fungi in the Bay Area. They're great. And they send you fresh. They'll send you wild stuff that their foragers pick.
Wow. From the Bay Area.
Yeah, they're
wow.
fantastic.
We'll have to look that up here.
Oh yeah, no, I buy from them all the time. But the best way is, so no matter what kind of mushroom it is, whether it's a white button mushroom or a boletus, a porcini, it's all fresh is best.
Fresh is
always
best.
Fresh is best. So you can grow mushrooms yourself it's just not that hard. You can buy these mushroom logs and produce oyster mushrooms. You can do shiitake logs in your backyard. So there's that. Then you can join a mycological society and learn to foray and find out what's in your community, what's growing in your woods.
Exactly. The people in those groups are just incredibly interesting too. I mean, they know so much.
But very giving. Yeah, very generous.
Yes.
With their knowledge. Yeah,
and it's really important to if you're going to forage. I think that's a great place to start, because you need to be very careful and cautious about what you pick, that it's not poison.
Yeah. Well, you learn the poisonous mushrooms and you learn the edibles. I mean, you learn them all. Everything that grows in your area, one at a time or two at a time. You learn those mushrooms. So, okay, I'm not going to pick the, angel of deaths. I am going to pick the chanterelles.
Right. So, exactly.
Yeah. Let me make a point that very few people realize. You can touch any mushroom. It's not going to hurt you.
Oh, okay.
So you can touch the mushrooms that are on the most, the deadly end of the poisonous spectrum, and it won't hurt you. It only will hurt you if you metabolize it. So you have to eat the mushroom. So just pick them, identify them, look at them at home, do spore prints. Just don't put them in your mouth until you know what they are.
You're really, really, really sure.
Yeah.
And that's where that group comes in really handy. Yeah. I had some mushrooms growing in my backyard in Chicago, and I had a friend who was part of the Mycological Society there, and I would send her pictures because I didn't have time to go to the groups, and I would say, what do you think of this? They're growing in my yard. I don't know if it's, I mean, I wouldn't eat it, but I was fascinated because they were varieties that I had never seen before. And she said, you have a really cool environment in your backyard. You could probably grow your own. And I always wanted to do that because it was a very moist sort of forested area. And around Chicago, we have a lot of that. So
it's a great,
and
mushrooms. Yeah.
It's interesting because all around the world they can be grown.
Yeah,
they're everywhere.
It's like vegetables. You grow tomatoes or you grow eggplants or something, but why not grow mushrooms?
Why not grow mushrooms? Yeah, especially if you just have a fallen tree or you just get some wood. You don't even need a lot of space. You can just grow that on a balcony if you have the right environment, right? If you have the logs, and I've even seen mushroom grow kits at the grocery store.
You can start with fabulous. That. Yeah.
Why 100%.
Not? Yeah.
And what I do when I came back from Turkey, and I can't get that taste out of my mouth of that my memory, I should say, of those wonderful mushrooms I ate there. And the woman that I met at the market, she said a doctor comes every week to buy his mushrooms because he believed in the medicinal power of them. She didn't elaborate, but I thought, well, that's really cool because I always think, food is my medicine. So when I came back, now I'm, in Southern California, lots of Asian markets. I have found and discovered that the Korean and Japanese markets have the coolest mushrooms. They have so many varieties of mushrooms. So I wanted to show people, and this is how mine have come. These are the organic king oyster mushrooms.
Yeah.
So let me I say I didn't open the package until now because I wanted to show people how they come. But so aren't these so cool? What is something we could possibly make with these?
So that's a kind of oyster mushroom, believe it or not. And one of the things that, I mean, there's a lot of variety. So mushrooms have their cell walls are composed of a number of things, including something called chitin. Chitin is the same sort of sugary, tough stuff that shrimp shells are made of. So as a result,
really?
yeah. So as a result, that the mushrooms are pretty sturdy and they can be cooked multiple times and they don't fall apart.
Right.
So those trumpets are very. I call them royal trumpets. They have a number of common names, and so they're fantastic to cut in half and cook right on a fire. You can grill them and they won't fall apart, and then you can dress them with oil and vinegar or whatever your thing is, right?
Right.
So you can grill them. Then there's people who cut them into little circles, and they are used them as a substitute for scallops in recipes for scallops. It's wonderful.
Interesting.
There's people who tear this king trumpet. What is yours?
Sort of comes out.
What did the menu? The growers, what are they calling this?
They're calling this king oyster mushroom.
A king oyster. Okay. So there's people who will tear it and then use it in the same capacity as shredded chicken in dishes.
Oh.
Yeah. It's really
great for
versatile.
Vegans,
Fabulous.
vegetarians.
Fabulous. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, these are so interesting because they're so thick. Yeah. I mean, definitely.
They're sturdy.
Meaty. Yeah, very sturdy. I mean, I like to put mushrooms in soups a lot. But my favorite way to eat mushrooms is to saute them in butter. But not the small thin mushrooms, but these kinds.
Yeah.
Saute them in butter and onion and throw them into eggs or even just as a side dish. I mean, they just go well with butter for some reason.
Mushrooms love the same kinds of companion ingredients that meat does. It's like a good guide to keep in mind. And in fact, mushrooms are on the same, or they're closer on the tree of life to animals than they are to plants. Wow. So mushrooms have more things in common, right, with animals than they do with plants. And so you can really think about your meat recipes and look to replace them with mushrooms. The main thing I would recommend is you keep in mind strong flavored mushrooms that like a matsutake, which has that combination of cinnamon red hots and dirty socks kind of flavor, or the apricot-y flavored chanterelles. Those you have to think about them if you're you have to think about their flavor if you're substituting them in a meat recipe. Sure. But something like the king trumpets or the royal trumpets that you have, they are a mild enough flavor to absolutely transfer into meat recipes really easily. And they love cream, savories. Yes. They love the meat spices, paprika. They love hot peppers. They love all kinds of dairy, wine. They do cooking them with alcohol. They love pretty much anything that meat does well with, you can kind of count on.
I think this is why Italians love to put mushrooms in pasta dishes, creamy pasta dishes, because it goes so well as a meat substitute. And that's how I was sort of first introduced to cooking with mushrooms, is through the creamy pastas. And so, and like you said about the recipes with meat, I just want to point out the recipe I'm interested in trying is the halloumi burger recipe.
That's yummy.
Yeah. If you guys can see the picture, I'm gonna see if I can go.
We actually got a lot of burger recipes, mushroom burger recipes through the website. But the halloumi burger was my favorite. It just was so rich. It really was a flavor bomb. So that's why we selected that one.
Well, and the type of mushroom that's in there is portobello, which is commonly, recommended by you'll hear that a lot. If you want to replace a burger with, substitute meat, use portobellos. But I've never really done that because I didn't find a recipe that I thought was appealing. But this is something I would make because it's got that thick piece of halloumi.
Yeah.
And it looks like tomato and basil or something.
Well, you can kind of have fun at, the basic combination is the cooked down or sort of grilled portobello cap, which is sort of perfect for a burger because it's just like the right size,
same size.
And then the cheese, and then past that, it's a little bit like the author suggests all kinds of varieties. Her husband's like one kind of sauce, she likes mustard, he likes ketchup, whatever.
Right.
But so you can play with it as you wish. But those two, the grilled portobello and the halloumi cheese, really pack a lot of punch.
Yeah, that seems like a fantastic and filling recipe. Like you would eat that, and I don't think you'd be hungry for a while.
Yeah, and you'll feel satiated from that. From those good amino acids in the mushroom.
Yeah, and I that umami flavor is something I think that's for me what satiates me the most is that umami. It's something that I feel once you taste that in a dish, you're like, wow, I just had a fantastic meal. Yeah, because it just satisfies something in us that we don't get all the time.
Yeah, and it's the glutamate in them.
Glutamate.
Very, very satisfying.
See, we don't understand always. We sometimes don't understand the science behind why we like certain things or why. And it's so interesting that, as you said, mushrooms are more like animals than plants.
Yeah,
like, that's something I never knew. But as you're talking now, I understand. It's making sense to me about why I sometimes even crave them over other vegetables. They don't seem like they say they don't seem like they give me the same satisfaction. I mean, they give me more satisfaction.
Yeah, it's a different.
It's a totally different
because
world.
It's not like you get a big carb hit like you will from
maybe that's
a potato, but it's combined with carbs. They're fantastic. They give you all kinds of nutritional benefits.
I think sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all.
I think for people who are interested in experimenting with different flavors, especially, I will never call myself an expert in Asian cooking, but I really this year tried to dive deeper into really understanding all the different stuff that's available in Asian cooking, like miso and wasabi and all the different fish sauces. I mean, I've used them before, but now when I go to Asian markets, I'm like really determined to come up with a very authentic recipe as much as possible. And mushrooms they seem to be part of lots and lots of Asian recipes. And so in your book, I found the Enoki mushroom soup recipe, and you and I talked about it, that would be a good one. I'm going to post this recipe soon, but what I love about it is that Enoki mushrooms, I put them all in the soup, so I don't have something to show everybody right now, but I'll show you something.
They look like little white nails, and they're sold in bundles, almost like little bouquets.
Yeah, they come in like 5-ounce packages, which is perfect because that's what the recipe calls for, 5 ounces of them. But the recipe has noodles, it has miso paste, which typically has alcohol in it. So I found a halal non-alcoholic alternative for people to use, so they could definitely still make the recipe. But it also has tofu, and there's different types of tofu that are out there. So for me, this recipe was helping me get my feet wet and taking that extra step of like finding the miso that doesn't have alcohol in it, and then instead of just leaving it out. I'm not a big fan of just leaving things out. I want to find something that's an alternative, but it helps me to use mushrooms that I would never think of using, because I've bought the Enoki mushrooms before, threw them in a soup, but I didn't have like a specific recipe to follow. And they were very tasty, but knowing that this was something that was recommended and so on, it's so rare to see those types of mushrooms listed in a recipe. So That's a really good one, and I've enjoyed it. So I'll be posting that recipe on my website soon for everybody to see that, but it's in the cookbook. So
It is. I
I'm
love
going
it too.
I'm going to just show you guys a couple of other types. These are called white Shimeji mushrooms. They come in packets like this. I love how they package things in the Asian stores, but they're so cute. They're so cute. And there's white and brown ones, but I love that they come like, all
right.
Sort of.
So you see, like if you tip to show me the bottom of the mushroom.
Yes.
All right. So that's what your viewers are seeing right now is the mycelium, which is the fungus, all kind of wrapped up in some growth medium, like whatever soil they were using. Right. So it's this white spider webby stuff that is the fungus. It's like the apple tree, and the mushroom is like the apple. It's the fruiting body of the fungus. It's the vehicle for sexual reproduction. It's where the spores come from, and so on.
Okay.
So when you get a mushrooms like that have their mycelium and some growth medium still attached, you just slice that off with a knife and put it into your compost bucket. Will break down. It's completely natural. And then in the case of those mushrooms, you would gently tear them apart, and then they're ready to use. Because they're so small, you can use them whole in recipes. We have a lovely recipe for tempura, Japanese tempura. A classic. Simple Japanese tempura with those mushrooms.
What else, other than a tempura, what else could I use these in? Do you think? What would they be?
Well, it depends on what kind of cooking you're doing. There's a wide variety of them. I have used them. I like to do as many things as I can with the whole mushroom so I can see it, and because they're small, that's possible.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've pickled those mushrooms. There's a few different pickling recipes in the book. And then there's lots of uses once you've got the pickled mushrooms.
Right. They're so cute and delicate. I feel a little bit scared to fry them up, but even the enokis, they hold up.
Enokis are tough. Why? Because their cell walls are made of chitin, and chitin's tough. Tough stuff.
Is very tough.
Because you have to think, the mushroom is forming in its early stages. The mycelium creates what's called a primordia, which is like a baby mushroom, but it's underground, where it's just beginning to surface the ground. Mushrooms are something like 70% water. How do they push through the ground? And some you even see pushing through asphalt. How do they do that without falling apart if they're mostly water? Tough cell walls.
Tough cell walls.
So that benefit to the mushroom ecological or environmentally is a benefit to us as cooks, because it means that we can cook mushrooms for quite a while and they'll maintain their integrity.
And as you said, they're a sustainable source of food as well.
Yes, potentially. They because mushrooms, there's mushrooms grow different ways, right? And a lot of the mushrooms that you see, I would say the vast majority of cultivated mushrooms in the markets are saprobes. That means the fungus's role in life is to break down dead and dying plant material, primarily plants. And so to cultivate them, people gather their preferred foodstuff like oak chips, and then they inoculate it with the fungus. The fungus grows, and given some other triggers, it'll produce mushrooms. So the saprobic mushrooms are the ones that are most likely to be found in the markets. The other kind, which is less likely to be found in markets, are the ones that are usually collected in the wild, and they are the result of mutualistic relationships between fungus and trees. And that's something that the Fantastic Fungi movie spends a lot of time with, showing how trees communicate with each other and do various environmental services for each other by means of the fungi that connect the roots of the trees with each other. Those fungi, some of them produce mushrooms like chanterelles and boletes, truffles, which is an underground mushroom. So those are the two lifestyles. I can't remember how I got onto this track. I wanted to give you a little
sustainability.
lesson.
We were talking
Oh,
sustainability.
sustainability. So the saprobes, because they grow on dead and dying plant stuff usually, you can use a lot of agricultural waste to grow them up. The white button, for example, grows out of manure or, composted stuff, a lot of manure.
Yeah, I used to find them in my compost bin all the time.
They turn like poop into protein in a week. They're fantastic. So they're very low impact because you're reusing agricultural waste. Now, if you were going to try to grow mushrooms that are a result of mutualistic relationships, that's also environmentally sustainable, because you would have to plant a tree farm with all kinds of benefits that come along with that. So so they are good for your body. They're great fun in the kitchen, and and they're good for the planet.
Yes, I'm even seeing them. Well, years ago I started seeing them, but it seems like more and more they're even being used in beauty products.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of products that are coming out of varying degrees of efficacy. I couldn't tell you about a beauty product, but certainly
it's just interesting to see.
Well, it's like people are suddenly saying, wow, this is a new material with vast opportunities that nobody was paying any attention to for a long time.
Exactly. And probably, just so misunderstood. But with your book and with all the information that's coming out now more and more, with the type of writing that you do and the mycological associations that are out there, I think it's waking people up to the possibilities of how they can benefit from consuming mushrooms. But also what I love about this book is that the recipes are not, they're not ordinary. They're not typical, but they're still approachable and easy enough for the average cook to just dive in and make. That's what I love about them. And I have to tell, I think lots of my readers will really love a couple of the drink recipes back here. I have to say, I've seen, I've been in culinary for eons, and I've seen a lot of things, but I have never ever seen mushrooms in lassi or tea. Well, I have recently seen mushroom tea bags, but not in the way that you're showing how to make them. You have a longevity lassi drink here.
Yeah,
and
that's
spicy,
delicious. Yeah.
And the spicy chaga chai tea.
Yeah.
So I'll just kind of show people here. Well, kind of see.
I love the lassi because you make these ice cubes with the base.
Yeah.
It's like
Power
a chaga
mushroom.
tea. Yeah. And then you have them in the fridge or the freezer. So you can grab one or two and put it into your blender with, other yummy things that you're having for breakfast, and boom, you have a very delicious, potentially medicinal, certainly nutritious.
I would say, much of my audience fasts in the month of Ramadan. It's our 30 days of fasting per year. And I'm always interested in recipes that give people energy for throughout the day before they start their fasting day. So like the wee hours of the morning before the sun rises. And I think this is a recipe I will definitely be recommending, because everything in it there's honey, turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, cardamom, almond milk, or you can put any milk, I'm sure.
Yes, of course.
And then of course the chaga mushroom chunks. So,
and it's delicious too.
Wow. You wouldn't think
if it wasn't delicious, it wouldn't be in there.
Of course. So the recipes are well tested, obviously. And pictures are really enticing. But then you have the spicy chaga chai tea. So if people get some chaga mushrooms, they can kind of experiment with both of these recipes. So Look at that, guy. Look at this recipe, guys. Whoops.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Looks so fantastic.
Yes. And that's Kristen Blizzard. Yeah, she's terrific.
This is really interesting. I think I see chaga mushrooms at the Asian store all the time, and I never know what to do with them. I always say,
Yeah.
what?
So they're not really a culinary mushroom. They're more of a medicinal. They're used more in a
Oh,
medicinal
okay,
capacity than in a
okay.
culinary capacity. But some people incorporate them into recipes that are for eating. Others, like the chai tea, is really trying to use them in a way that's delicious, but it's more supplemental to your diet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is a part of the tea.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but you'll notice in the book there's a
Wow.
chaga chocolate chip cookies in there.
Yes.
So if your thing is not a shake, but maybe it's a little sweet, then that's a way to get your chaga. But there's people who will drink chaga tea every morning because they believe that it has that it supports their immune system, kind of keeps you well.
Yeah, my cousin started buying these mushroom teas, and at first I
Mhm.
thought, I don't know if I would really like that. And then now it's like our favorite tea. We when we get together, we always say, "Do you want the mushroom tea?" Because it
Fun.
just but it's not super potent. But I think if you have your own chaga mushrooms, you'd probably really get some potency in there. And
It's hard to know. It's a traditional medicine kind of thing,
mhm.
and there's, like a lot of, like many medicinal mushrooms that are on the market right now. Their efficacy is really not established.
Yeah, sure.
Some definitely are. Penicillin is a perfect example
Oh
of
yeah.
a mushroom, a fungus that is without a doubt medicinal, makes you well.
Yes, exactly. Well, I
Works.
think people are
Taxol is another possible,
Taxol.
yeah. So Taxol, which is a medication women take when they have breast cancer,
Mm.
reduces tumors. So Taxol is the medicine, but it's the precursor chemical comes from the bark of the yew tree. Well, it turns out that an endophytic fungi that lives between the cells of the yew tree also produces this precursor chemical.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's so much once you dive into this kind of topic, you realize how much we don't know. As
It's just
as
not
average consumers.
widely known by the general public. It's like finding out all of a sudden about plants. Like someone
Mhm.
says, "Have you heard about plants?" It's this
Right.
huge topic
Well,
with incredible
yeah.
implications. It's super
Yeah,
fun to get into.
that's why I love the trailer of the Fantastic Fungi movie, because in the first 2 minutes, you're just introduced to this vast network that's underground, and you realize, oh my God, we don't know anything. We
Yeah,
don't
they're
know.
everywhere.
We haven't scratched the surface.
Yeah.
It's sort of like looking into the ocean, and scientists are saying, well, now we're down there, and we realize we don't know very
Yeah.
much. you know,
Yeah.
so the world is
It's a
fascinating that
great
way.
it's a great horizon to look toward this,
Yeah.
the microbial world, if you will. Right.
I just appreciate this book so much, and I feel like I want people to really look at it as not just a cookbook, but an exploration of um, opening up their culinary horizons, and sitting down with it and actually reading it, because I'm actually reading before I'm cooking, because it's just there's so much in there that I feel
Mm-hmm.
like are benefiting my personal knowledge of something that it's not every day that you come across something that um, can directly impact your life. And you can definitely like go to the grocery store, pick out a few varieties that we never tried before. And I think people who have children and want to cook with them, how fun is it? Because
Yeah.
they're just so interesting. They're not your typical ingredients to cook with, but yet very approachable.
Yeah.
And so I personally think that there's, for anybody who, if you're a picky eater, or you have a family that needs to come together and choose a recipe, you can find something in this book that you would want to cook. Like, I'm looking right now at the porcini and pumpkin pappardelle.
Oh
I mean,
yeah, that's
I think,
delicious. Sean Sullivan. Yeah.
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 So I'm definitely not done with this book, and it's kind of hard to say which one I would try next. But do you have a favorite recipe from the book?
Yeah. So that's a hard question to answer because, I curated all these recipes. I tested hundreds, at least 250 recipes to
Oh,
get this
wow.
collection.
Uh-huh.
And so I love every one. That said, I think the one that I'm making like now is the one I love the most. So I'm planning to make for the holidays the Graham's candy cap
Yes.
eclairs.
Oh,
Because they're kind of
eclairs.
like,
Yeah.
it's a holiday and you want something sort of
Okay.
fancy. But the recipe is so straight up. It's like, if you follow that recipe, you're going to have eclairs that are delicious and look great at the end. So I've got my dried candy cap mushrooms I got from Far West Fungi, and I'm going to make the cream, and I'm going to make the pâte à faux and the pâte à choux, sorry, and then
Here they are.
and make those beautiful eclairs. Do you want to show us?
Yes, I do. Look at these.
Aren't they great? They're like French pastries, but they're filled with mushroom flavor. And the thing about
Oh
those
my
candy
gosh.
cap mushrooms, they're really cool. If they're used when they're dried, they're used primarily in sweet applications because they have a very, very distinctive maple flavor, like maple syrup.
Okay, perfect.
And
for
it's just great if you make like a simple syrup, some water and sugar, and you add those candy cap mushrooms and let them cook. They will infuse that simple syrup with their flavor, and of course the mushroom is edible. So you
Wow.
rehydrate them in a sugar syrup, and you can pour that over ice cream, poached pears. The sky's the
Who would have
limit.
ever thought? Who would have ever thought to
It's totally
include
cool.
mushrooms in desserts
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
drinks? I think that's probably the most eye-opening thing I always knew that mushrooms were medicinal, like certain ones are medicinal, but I never really thought about them in sweets. I never thought about incorporating them into something sweet or making a syrup.
Their culinary application is wide. And
Very.
So for your listeners, I would recommend that when they get a new mushroom, the first thing to do, I think, is just don't add a lot of other stuff. Just do a little bit of it, saute it up, and taste it, because they all have distinct flavors. I mean, some are milder and so can be categorized kind of in a lump, but others are, full of flavor of, coffee flavors, or, these are musty flavors, wonderful musty flavors of like the black trumpets, for example.
Yeah.
And so you can just taste them and get an idea and say, wow, this chanterelle kind of tastes a little bit apricot-y. You can use it in your apricot recipes,
and there's also ways to savory,
yeah,
right? And there's also ways to preserve them as well, because I got these mushrooms to show the listeners what they look like, but now I'm thinking, okay, it's just me over here. What am I going to do with all these mushrooms? But as I'm looking through the book, there's also recipes for preserving them. So
yes, it's pretty simple to preserve them. Now, some love to be dried. Like the morels, they just do great dried. The porcini mushrooms do great dried. Shiitake are great dried. Others, and black trumpets are great dried. Others, like chanterelles, they don't really like to be dried. But you can freeze any mushroom. So here's basically what you do. You cut them into, like the big trumpets, you might want to cut into smaller pieces. You can do as little as parboil it and then pop it into a freezer baggie, and in it goes into the freezer. Or you can saute them, and as soon as they give up their liquor, because they got, and I say liquor, I mean their water, because they have a lot of water in them, and when heat hits that mushroom, water gets pushed out, and then freeze them with their water in baggies.
With the water.
So let the whole thing cool down and pour them with their water, because that stuff is tasty. You don't want to let it go. And then when you defrost, you have the liquid, which you can continue to cook off, or you can strain off and use in another capacity. And And then of course the boiled ones are ready to go. It's like buying frozen stuff in the supermarket.
Right. And I noticed the Enoki mushroom soup recipe called for mushroom broth or water.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started thinking, well, if you have enough mushrooms and you want to use them boiled, you can actually just preserve that water, right?
Oh, yes.
Don't throw it out.
And in fact, like fresh shiitake have kind of tough stems. And when we go back to your the cultivated mushrooms that you purchased today, sometimes the stems, if they all come together, they can be kind of dense and hard. If you were going to eat them right away, you would cut that small. You can also remove it, take that hunk of stem. Well, you want to cut off the soil, but if it's got a hunk of stem on it, and see, these are all so once you remove all those mushrooms, you'll see that there's a hunk of stem inside there. You can throw that into a stock pot, and it's a great sort of it's like using the scraps, or save it when you do your scrap jar, of onion skins and things like that you're saving to make stock. It absolutely is great. Or maybe you just boil it up with some bay leaves or something, and you might just get 1 or 2 cups of stock off it. So what?
That's fine. It's
great.
That's giving yourself nutrition water, basically.
And it also bumps up the flavor of every dish that you use it in.
Yes,
so the
exactly.
shiitake mushrooms have very tough stems, and people will often remove them. Don't discard. They make fabulous stock.
Yeah, that's the thing. We tend to be such a throwaway society about everything, and we think that only certain parts of anything is useful. But I mean, how did our ancestors, bring flavor into food? It was through the scraps. It was through the
it's a layering of flavor. That you don't use just water. Use water that's been flavored with something that you boiled earlier. So
exactly. And as we were talking about mushrooms being a good substitute for meat, I would think that the mushroom stock would be a great beef stock recipe.
100%.
Right?
Very, very useful in place of beef stock. I've done it many times.
I have to admit, I've never done a mushroom stock, but I think because I have all these mushrooms here and I need to process them, I think what I'm going to do is make a stock and preserve the rest. There's a couple of recipes here, so I'm really interested in that, because I don't do much preserving like in jars or anything like that. I usually just freeze things, but I think
you can freeze the stock. There is no USDA data, to my knowledge, for pressure canning mushroom stock. It's just they haven't done the research yet. It's not like a moral thing or opinion thing. It's just they haven't done the research on it. So what I do when I make mushroom stock is I process it in the pressure canner for the same amount of time that the USDA calls for just canning mushrooms like whole, like small mushrooms whole. That's probably overkill. You don't need to pressure can a liquid for as long as you do a solid. But since there's no data, I err on the side of caution. And so, because it takes 20 minutes to pressure can chicken stock, but with the mushrooms, you maybe have to do 40 or 45 minutes. I forget what the exact timing is, because there's no alternative that's been tested yet. But, give it time. They'll get around to it.
So for people who don't want to even go through all that, I think maybe pickling might be, can you refrigerate pickle these? Like instead of...
All the recipes that we did in the book are for refrigerator pickles. For the simple reason that I don't have, even though I'm a master preserver and I've written books about preservation, I don't have a lab where I can check the shelf stability of the products that our authors had submitted. So without having that kind of information, I can't be 100% sure that there won't be spoilage or some kind of food poisoning. I don't know. And they might say, hey, it's, I have no problem with it, but I need the data. I need to be able to say for sure. So that's why we converted those recipes, which might have been fine. I'm not saying they wouldn't, but for my own confidence, converted them all to refrigerator.
Yeah, I think that's easier. I mean, I honestly never really got into canning and preserving because of I don't know. I felt too busy and it seemed like a big production and I never had the space. And so I typically reverted to just refrigerator pickling things, cucumbers and stuff like that. And it's easier.
Yeah.
You have to eat them in a shorter time, obviously, but it's a good alternative. It's like, I'm not going to be able to eat these right now, but I don't want to waste them. So that's a good option.
My book that you mentioned earlier, Well Preserved, is all small batch canning, like 2 jars.
Okay, we'll have to put a link to that book.
So it's really simple and fun. You just need to practice it like anything else.
I know. And it's the what people have been doing for eons.
Yeah, and we have these great mason jars with the screw on with the bands and lids, and it works really well. And as long as you're doing, you can do water bath canning, which is good for all those pickle recipes. Or if you want to get to the next level, get a little pressure canner and, you can really put up foods. I just put up a bunch of potatoes from someone's garden. And it's fabulous. I just can dump out these beautiful garden fresh, garden potatoes, not tomatoes, potatoes into a dish,
I mean, that's the beauty. I mean, a lot of people are trying to, grow their own stuff today, but they feel inundated with so much of it. So that's the next step is learning how to preserve properly. I tend to like the dried stuff because it's just easier for me to store it.
Yeah, of course.
So for dried mushrooms, I think the Asian markets are amazing for the dried mushrooms. I can't believe how many varieties there are in some of these Asian stores. I can't understand what they all are, but I have seen the cap ear quite commonly. In the dried in bags.
Yes, the cloud ear, mushroom, or the wood ear is another.
Woody ear, yes.
It's helpful to learn the Latin binomials because they're consistent, whereas marketers will, different companies will give different common names. And then there's different common names from one region to the next. You know?
And with the Asian markets, you really kind of have to know what you're looking for because not everything is in English. So I've realized that I have to kind of know what I'm looking at to buy it. But the variety is amazing. And I have found, small bags, huge bags, but and I just think to myself, what are people making with these mushrooms? It's so fascinating to me. So now I have a sub hobby going on.
Excellent.
So I think I'm going to start. I'm going to look into the Bay Area Mycological Society because I imagine that they've got some really cool things going on. And you mentioned to me that you go out to the Bay Area and you forage, right?
I do, because the mushroom season in the winter where it's happening is West Coast. So from, especially Northern California, all the way up, you can find mushrooms in the winter when it's the rainy season. So one of my favorite things to do is I have a friend who runs a business called Myco Ventures. Like instead of adventures, it's Myco for mycology.
Oh, cool.
Myco Ventures. And he conducts these fantastic forays. And one of the forays he does, which I've been on, but now I kind of go with them just on my own. But one of the ones that I've been on is a foray to hunt burn morels in the Sierra Nevadas.
Oh,
and that is just amazing. So when there's a forest fire in the summer, and then rain in the winter, then in the spring, depending on location, morels will come up in incredible abundance. Like it's not even hunting. It's more like just collecting, picking, bending over, lying down and picking them because they're all over.
They're everywhere.
And it's very exciting to see the bounty of mushrooms, but it's also beautiful to see the forests in their decline, right? They're all burned up. They're like
Right.
charcoal steaks. They're all moaning in the wind. And then on the forest floor, all this little bit of nature beginning to happen. The mushrooms, little grasses. It's a very,
Life comes back.
kind of rejuvenative experience. And so I go do that if I can at the end of May. I didn't go
Wow.
last year because of pandemic, but maybe this year I will be able to.
And speaking of the pandemic, I think we also touched on this in our conversation that foraging is one of those things that people can do if they don't want to be, in closed or, environments and kind of afraid of the social distancing, not happening. Being outside is the perfect activity for families to do together. And so,
we're seeing that happening across the country. Mycological societies, we all chat with each other,
sure.
And they're seeing a huge number of enrollments. And we think part of the reason is just mushrooms are in the zeitgeist right now. Folks are hearing about it and getting interested. And, books like mine are really helping, or ours is really what it is really helping kind of build that understanding. But the mycological societies think that because of the pandemic, families were looking for things that they could do, as a family group that was kind of educational and fun for the kids, but very safe, and so you can go and mushroom hunt with your pod of people and get out into the woods and do something that's fun. And then, and that's sort of educational value. And the kids love to do it. They're great at mushroom hunting. And we think that may be fueled. And that, as well as some of the, I've got to find my own food sort of panics that went on as well.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. And so more people were interested in finding out what they, am I going to have to live in the woods? And if so, which mushrooms can I eat?
Well, I have to say that some of the most interesting people I've in the food world, or and when I watch documentaries like yours, like people who are survivalists love to forage, and if you talk to people who've been through really difficult times, I watch documentaries about the blue zones and people who've been through war and all kinds of stuff, and when they're asked about how they survived the times without food, they knew what to look for, whether it was, greens or mushrooms or whatever. They knew how to survive. They knew what food was in their local area. So if there's anything that the pandemic, a positive that could come out of it, I would say that people perhaps felt the need to know what's around them and where they could forage and
what they can eat from their own backyards. But I think there's an additional benefit, because when folks start getting interested in wild things, and their observational abilities start to get more fine-tuned, and their appreciation of nature increases, then I think our responsibility toward nature and our kind of codependence with nature becomes more and more upfront and forward. And that's a good thing.
That's a very good thing, especially for the kids. I think, if we want the next generation to, we ourselves need to be preserving the environment and caring, but we need also the next generation to really understand where the food comes from, literally. And so the foraging seems like a perfect experience for kids to say, okay, the mushroom doesn't come from a bag at the grocery store, really. It really comes from these forests, and then maybe they will be more interested in preserving that the whole environment. I mean, I think that's why I'm so interested in nature. I was a kid who went out and knew my neighborhood. I knew what was happening in the natural environment, and when kids were out exploring, playing in the dirt and so on. And so that's really important for us. But and how I didn't really ask you if we could go back for just a moment, because you yourself are such a fascinating person to me. I mean, the more I've read about you, I'm like, how did you become a nature writer? what is it about? Was there something in your childhood, your background, and what made you decide to follow this passion of what you write about?
When I was in college, I was an English major because I loved writing. I wanted to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I moved into writing about food in my career and writing cookbooks. And then I encountered mushrooms, and I was always writing about wild foods, but sorry. But but in order, I was fascinated with mushrooms, but in order to find mushrooms, I had to learn a little bit about why they grew where they grew.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm being interrupted.
It's okay.
And that led down to this wormhole of learning about mycology. So I had always thought of myself as not being a science person. I was a, English major in
Right.
college. But my curiosity about the kingdom fungi, even though it started with a culinary fascination, it really quickly became a window by which I learned, I understood nature in a deeper way.
Mm-hmm.
And I also learned that I could understand nature in a deeper way. And that was extremely satisfying to me, to find out that I'm not limited. The only thing that was limiting me was my curiosity.
Yeah. Right. And sometimes we can box ourselves in, particularly as if, you're known as a food writer. So you stick to just like the culinary, cooking or aspects of it. But like, it is a fascinating world to dive into, even every single type of ingredient we have could have a whole cookbook about
there's biology behind it all.
Right.
And for me, coming from an instructive, a tendency to want to explain, like I'm sort of an explanatory journalist. Every cookbook writer is, in essence.
Right.
You're explaining what makes it work in terms of, biology. In terms of both cooking and nature, it's the study of biology that really informs. Now, there's other subjects that don't involve in biology, but for me, looking for the biological explanation, the underpinnings behind all these things that are a normal part of my life, has been exceptionally rewarding. It's sort of like the child that says, "Why is the sky blue?" I'm that person. I'm that perennial child who's like, "Why is the sky blue?"
And that's what brings out your curiosity. Just gave us such a gift.
Thank you.
And what you've done here today. So I can't thank you enough for sharing your time and expertise with us. And I know we're a little bit over our time and you're a very busy lady, so I have to let you go. But I just want to remind everybody again, fantastic Fungi Community Cookbook by edited and with essays by Eugenia Bone, our guest today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to put a link to the book, actually to a couple of your books here.
Fantastic.
For people who are interested in. But I'm also going to be posting the recipe that I talked about from your book, and people will be able to follow those links in the post as well to order. So it's a great gift, guys, for those of you who are interested in finding the right holiday gift for your family, your friends, anybody, just not just a cook, but maybe somebody who really loves the science and biology of food. I think this is a fantastic and perfect gift to give. So
thank you so much. I hope people enjoy it. It was a joy to do.
Thank you again. We'll talk.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch. I'll let you know if I go into any foraging expeditions over here.
Excellent. Well, anytime. I look forward to it.
Thank you again, Eugenia. You have a great day and happy holidays to you.
You too. Bye.